Ancient Greek warfare is filled with mysteries, misconceptions, and theories, however none as infamous as the famous Othismos. Was it literally a great push of armies, or a metaphorical pushing a position? This topic has captivated both scholars and non-scholars alike for basically as long as hoplite warfare has been studied. Today I am joined by Professor Paul Bardunias, an excellent historian and author of the book Hoplites at War, which I highly recommend to anyone interested in ancient Greek warfare. And today we're going to run through what we believe are the common misconceptions of the Othismos and hope to shine some light into what was probably a more realistic take on what this Othismos, this great push, really was. So let's throw it over to Paul.
I just want to give a little talk on the Aspis itself. So the Aspis is a remarkable shield. And if we look inside the Aspis, we can see that I'm holding it in a little grip here in my hand, and I have something called a porpax on my forearm. Sometimes it's actually even closer to the elbow up here. And the neat thing about it is my elbow is pretty much in the middle of the shield. What that means is rotating around my elbow is really quite easy, very quick. It also means that the weight pulling my fingers here down is balanced by the weight on the other side of the shield pulling my hand up. So holding this up for a long time is quite easy because it just hangs from my upper arm. As long as I can let it hang from my upper arm like this, I don't have to actually lift it with my hand because I don't have to use my hand at all. It'll just hang from my upper arm. And I think that's actually why this shield was designed. This shield was designed so that hoplites could stand like this for a long period of time while they were in some sort of a shield wall formation, throwing spears themselves and protecting light, what they called naked men behind them who were throwing spears over their heads. So that, I think, is the primary reason that the shield is built like this. The other really neat feature of this shield is that it has this depth. And you can see it is a somewhat deep shield. And what that does is, if we end up getting all crushed together, this thing rests on my upper chest like this, and on my leg. Like, hopefully you can see from the side. It arches over my midsection. Because it arches over my midsection, no matter how crushed I get, I can still breathe. Right now, it's all up against my body, and I'm having no problem breathing whatsoever, because it's not crushing my diaphragm. And I think that's fundamentally why these shields have this arched shape here. And that brings us to the other thing we want to talk about, which is probably the most contentious issue in all of hoplite combat, and that's Othismos, or what some people call the pushing in combat. I think it's been completely misunderstood by both sides in the academic world. On the one hand, we have this group that dominated the thought of most of the 1900s, that what they did was like a rugby scrum. The men would run at each other at high speed in a huge formation, smash into each other like rutting rams, and then immediately start to push each other and try to break up their formations by pushing in a concerted push of all the ranks at once. On the other side, they thought that this whole notion of pushing was completely sort of just describing hard fighting. Like you would say, you could say that ships were pushed off of the sea and pushed into the shore. They're not actually physically pushed, they're just sort of herded off the sea onto the shore. There's a middle ground between that, though, and the middle ground between that comes up when you realize what probably is happening when you have large crowds of men together on these battlefields. And this is how I got into studying hoplites, because I study large crowds of insects and animals and how they move in herds and swarms. And what you see is this sort of group movement that only happens to humans during things like crowd disasters at concerts, or when there's a panic in the streets sometimes and people get crushed. We see that, and they die through asphyxia, where their diaphragms are crushed and they die standing up, actually, and then they'll fall and they'll be trampled. But usually they're actually dead by the time they fall. You could fight as a hoplite in this crazy density where we end up crushed together. and I can stay alive because of this Aspis. If not for the Aspis, I would not stay alive. Now, there's some ramifications for this on what Othismos is. For one thing, the old notion that you ran at each other at high speed to crash into each other like rams doesn't make any sense in terms of the physics involved, because no matter how hard you run at another line of men, as long as you have, let's say, 4 ranks of men, you just all get absorbed together. Nobody's getting knocked over when there's 4 ranks of men. You could run any number of men into my 4 ranks of men and you will not push them off the field immediately. They will come to a halt when they hit my 4 ranks of men. That's just the way the physics of interacting crowds work. And it's because you're not coming at me at a solid mass. You're coming at me as sequential rows of men hitting. So each one just gets absorbed. Now, we have also shown that through experiments. We've shown that it doesn't matter if you run at the enemy, you're not going to just sort of knock them off their feet and push down. You can do it to 1 rank of men, but you can't do it to a whole bunch of men. The other thing that we see is if you are actively trying to push the way that some believe you did, which is through the shoulder sideways like this. If you're pushing this way, that sounds good because that's how I would push something just as a single person. I would push through my shoulder, right? Some have claimed that the shield was designed for this exact thing, to go into the shield to push. Like many things with hoplite combat, that works great if you're alone. But once you start to put men together, you can't do it. And the reason is, 1, you can't actually push through my body this way. You cannot really push through with any force. And the more you push on the back of my body, pushing me this way, why don't you push on the back of my body? The more you push on the back of my body like this, I may start off this way, but when we get a ton of force on my back, I always collapse like this anyway. And I collapse standing up. So everyone in the Othismos, when they're under high pressure, are always standing like this anyway. How are we generating force against the enemy force? We're literally leaning against them. So all the men behind me are leaning against me like this. This means 2 things. It means 1, I'm leaning, I'm not actively pushing. It's not my muscles that are doing this anymore. Now I'm just leaning. And I'm hoping to survive getting squished. Because of that, I can do it for a long time because I'm not actively pushing as much as leaning. And you notice my whole right arm is free. So my right arm is free. Now I can go to the sword and I can use a sword. If I'm in a rank behind, I can still use my spear over the top of the men in front, right? So it's not a tactic where I either push or I fight. It's I fight and we all push. I kind of liken it to a knife fight in a mosh pit, because that's what it's kind of like. You're having a situation where the men are just closely crowded together, still fighting. Obviously, shorter weapons are better, and not surprisingly, we see in the period when we get the deepest ranks of hoplites, we also seem to see some of the shortest swords. These things that are sometimes called enchiridia, or daggers, that are used by Spartans and Thebans and other people. Is there anything else you want to say about Othismos?
Yeah, I think something else is as you said, people often treat it as though armies marched up and pushed.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I think it's more of a circumstance as opposed to the way of war.
Yeah.
So I think you would have seen lines clash, maybe even pull away again, and the clash pull away again. You'd see some spear fencing in between that. I think mainly that Othismos, the push, is more referring to when combat gets up close and personal, when you are in a push, and when you're using swords. And as you say, we see sort of an evolution in the archaic period. We see, especially for the period, pretty long, decently long swords, and we get to essentially kitchen knife-sized swords in the 300s.
Yeah.
So we sort of see this evolution into really tight, and I mean, we can demo this if we're up close. And we're sort of pressed.
Imagine
a
really
long
pressed.
sword is not helpful. Okay, so my sword's up close in this air pocket. I can grab it easily, and I can now go over the top. I can get around. I can go through eye holes, through neck holes. I can do all sorts of stuff with a really small sword. But if I had a long one, I'm now having to go up here and fence around. Whereas if we're in a lighter, sort of less packed, dense formation, I might want a longer sword. I can harmonious blow. You can get around. I can reach you in different areas. But once you sort of close that formation into a push, right, a tight press of shields and swords, a small sword is going to be a lot more helpful.
And this is important, because if I am correct and he is correct, and this is how they're fighting, it explains certain things about the swords, like why are they smaller, right? What are the targets of the swords? The targets are these little chinks, like the side of the neck. Really importantly, One of the big targets for a sword in this sort of Othismos press is the back of the neck. And you might say, well, how are they getting the back of the neck? And the reason is I stab and miss him, right? I'm going to drag the sword across the back of his neck, doing what's called a draw cut. And that would be devastating to the back of your neck. But look at the back of my neck, right? This is a feature we have on these TYs, is this big neck tab sticking up. This big neck tab completely protects the back of my neck from that draw cut. Right? Same thing with him. Often on these, you'll see a lip on these, on the back here. That lip catches that blade, so it can't get up into the back of his neck.
And you can see just in the shape of especially the Xiphos, more of this, it has that leaf where it gets thinner. That is, as you demonstrated in one of our previous videos,
with the tomato,
with the tomato prop, it just slices. And I mean, that would be, you're done.
Yeah, no, a strike like that would be horrifying. The other thing is with Othismos, it's a mistake to think that Othismos, as we said, is a sort of simply a tactic. It's something that arises as you're moving through other types of fighting. So if we look at how hoplites fought each other, I think they ran up to each other and charged, right? You can stay still, I'll just run. They run up to each other and charge, and they stop at spear range, and they fight with spears. The whole line stops. And you might think it's difficult to do, but it's actually very easy to stop a whole line of men from running. We've done this many times. It's not hard at all for a whole rank of men to just stop at the same time, you know, against a target. And we probably have some video you can put in there.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. And so that's one issue that people thought you had. Like, oh, how are you going to stop at the end? The answer is pretty easily. It's actually not that hard to stop. But then we would go through some spear fighting for a while, and two things can happen. One, I could get really tired, right? And if I'm really tired and I'm not blocking well anymore, I have two choices. One, get back out of range, which I can't do because there's people behind me. Or two, just give up spear fighting and give up spear fighting and just move in now to sword range, right? Because you think of it like a boxer. If you see a boxer in a match and he's tired and he's getting beaten up, he can either try to dance around and evade, or he can move into a clinch. And in many ways, I think Othismos is like that. It's happening when men are having their spears broken, so your spear breaks, which is probably pretty common. These are very light spears. Or for whatever reason, you're overmatched, you're done spear fighting. He's a great spear fighter, I'm not. Let's go to the sword. You end up shield to shield, right? Fighting, let's say even this far away at first, right? But over time, you're fighting, you're getting closer. And as you're getting closer, the guys behind me are trying to keep me in the fight. So this whole crowd phenomenon happens. Just exactly how you have a crowd phenomenon in, you know, one of these disasters in a theater or something. They're coming up behind, they're pushing me, and they're not throwing me into him. That's not how it works. But they're just coming up to help me out and support me. But they're helping me, and the helping me is making me have to fight a little closer, until we get to this crowded step, where at this step, I might not even be fighting him. I might be fighting him, because we're already in this deep, deep crowd, right? And then once we fought like that for a while, it's possible that the men behind me can unpack, and then he and I can literally just be like, you know, break off and move away. And we can go back to spear fighting, or we could step all the way back and hurl curses at each other for a half hour until we get brave again, and then go back to fighting. So when we think of these battles, it's not like a cycle or a sequence that's obligate. These different things can happen, sometimes in different order, and definitely they can go from one to another, right? So it's not just like, here's phase one, here's phase two, here's phase three, they run away. They can have this happen for a long time. Importantly, the unit I'm in can be spear fighting, and the unit next to us could be in Othismos. And the unit over there could be unengaged. I might just be standing at each other, throwing curses at each other. The whole line didn't have to do the same thing at the same time. And that's something that I think is difficult for people to grasp, because they think of a phalanx as the whole line. But that's because phalanx is kind of a terrible word for what they really are. Thucydides had a better term, and that was parataxes. And parataxes just meant taxis or units lined up next to each other. alongside, like a string of beads. And in that string of beads, one side is winning, and then maybe down the other side of the string of beads they're losing, right? In most of these hoplite battles, there's a point in the middle of the line somewhere where one group is winning, and right next to them they're losing. This was very common. So you can't think of this thing as one unified front that just does the same thing. It's all a mishmash of different combats within these different groups.
So there we go, Othismos. Hopefully we cleared that up a little bit for you, and let us know what your thoughts are in the comments. Myself and Paul will be scouring them and hopefully be able to respond to most of them as well. Of course, a special thanks to Paul for taking the time to film this video with us finally in person again for our second video. We filmed them in one go. If you haven't seen the first video, we were talking about overhand versus underhand spear, so I'll link that down below if you are interested. Thanks very much for watching this channel. Special thanks to our channel members who continually support the channel. If you yourself would like to go the extra mile to support the channel, then I just started the Patreon page, and of course YouTube memberships are a great help. But if not, no worries at all. Liking and subscribing is a great help, and sharing these niche videos around to a wider audience can really boost the channel up. So thanks very much for watching this video. Hopefully catch you in the next one.